Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast that is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Welcome to this third week in October. I know I say this every time I feel like I get on how quickly time goes, but time is really speeding by so fast. And every time I look up, I feel like we're almost in another month. So here we are, almost in another month. We have talked about this month domestic violence, also known as intimate partner violence, and breast cancer awareness, and just education and some of the things that people go through when they experience a diagnosis of breast cancer. And I wanted to take some time today. So today is one of my most favorite days of the year because it's my birthday. On October 11th last week, that is recognized as International Day of the Girl Child. And that day is just set aside to highlight some of the unique challenges that girls experience. But it's also an opportunity to promote girls' empowerment, addressing human rights, girls taking good care of themselves, us really taking some time and unplug and really connecting to who we are as girls that transition into women. And so this week, in honor of the little girl in me, I'm going to talk about the lady rules. So I know you all are like, okay, what are the lady rules? It's a term that I've coined. I'll say I've coined it. I haven't heard it, but it really comes from my mother. She used to, anytime I left the house, when I was an adolescent anyway, adolescent and above, she would always say, be a lady. And so it really made me think about some of the things that we're taught as girls, whether they're implicit or explicit, about who we are and what it means to show up and be a lady, what it means to show up to be a woman. Because there's a lot of pressure, I feel like, that is put on us at a certain age where then you need to be proper. You need to know how to conduct yourself in different settings. I talk a lot about things such as when you're sitting on a dais or in a pulpit or on a stage, you cross at the ankles, you don't cross at the knee. You don't want people looking under your skirt. That you also want to be mindful of the length of your attire when you're out in certain places, how you're dressed, because what do people look at as a woman? How you're dressed, how you wear your hair. There's a lot of commentary for us about how we as women show up, what we look like. You'll often hear a lot of people say very negative things about women when they don't look a certain way, when they don't talk a certain way, the taking care of other people, learning how to be doting and all of this mindful and cutesy and demure, right? That a lady should conduct herself in a certain way. And so for me growing up as a tomboy, that didn't necessarily fit how I saw myself. And a lot of these rules didn't make sense to me, like why you need pantyhose and why you need to wear slips and you don't need to have people be able to see through your dresses. And these are all things that I don't even think a lot of people necessarily experience in the same way. I got really tickled looking at a video. It was a reel of this woman talking about appropriate attire for funerals, and it's one of my favorites because she was addressing some of these things that really were staples to the ladies I grew up around, that they wanted to teach us how to conduct ourselves, how to be professional, how to articulate. My mother always used to say, open your mouth. Don't sound like you're talking with a mouthful of snuff. For those of you that grew up in the South, you know that some women actually dipped snuff. And so you'd see them spitting into a can. I had a grandmother that used to do that, and I was like, what is this? So those are a lot of things that we end up being told about ourselves. I remember growing up, if a girl got pregnant, she would have to go to the front of the church and she would have to apologize for getting pregnant. And there was never anyone with her. Like, who got you pregnant? Where is he? And how come he doesn't have to come up here? So, what do these things set up sometimes for us is they set up shame. And so, one of my good friends and a fellow mental health provider, Ebony Young, I told her she explains things very well. But she said guilt is us recognizing we made a mistake. It gives us the ability to hold ourselves accountable, to try to make things right. But shame is I feel like I'm bad. Shame is internalized, and it can make me feel really worthless. It can make me feel insecure and inadequate. And because shame can cause us to be overly responsible for other people, then it sets up this dynamic in our lives of feeling like we are to be seen and not heard, sometimes to be in the presence of taking care of other people, even at the expense of ourselves, that we can't take a day off, that how other people that are in our lives look is a reflection of us, whether that's your children or your husband or your significant other, your partner, whoever that may be. If you are over a ministry, if you are the CEO of a company, if you're a manager in a department, if you're a supervisor, a lot of these conversations have come up. We have a woman running for president, and a lot of the conversations are about how will people see her, how will she be respected, will people in other countries respect her as a woman when they don't look at women in the same way. And so there's these constant things that we're battling and we're thinking about that become a part of our lady rules. Don't have sex before marriage. You don't want people to see you as promiscuous, fast. You don't want to embarrass the family. And not necessarily these same things were given to our brothers, our cousins, our nephews who were males, that we had on us. And so when we then feel like I did something to violate these rules, so what a lot of women will tell me is, for example, if someone molested them or sexually assaulted them or sexually harassed them, then they're responsible for it. And we see a lot of victim shaming, right? And this is where these lady rules show up. Because if you had not been wearing, if you had not been there at this time, if you had not been drinking, if you had not gone over to a space by yourself, if you had not uh, gone unchaperoned, unsupervised, if you had not been appealing. I've definitely had people touch me inappropriately and say to me, well, what do you expect? Expect you to have appropriate boundaries, is what I expect. And so, oftentimes, because we feel like, well, if things happen to me per these lady rules, then it's my fault, then kind of sets us up to be in that role where we feel like, okay, well, once I've been spoiled, I'll never forget. Color Purple is one of my favorite movies, got a lot of good stuff in it. This She's been spoiled twice, meaning that you are unclean, meaning that you're not pure anymore. And oftentimes the shame is put on the young lady if she gets pregnant again, and not necessarily on anyone else, because you were supposed to keep your virginity. You were supposed to remain chaste. You know how males are, which I think is honestly should be insulting to men, for you to be presented as if you don't have any control over your urges, that you can't be attracted and be respectful, that you can't have appropriate boundaries with people. But also, what shame will do is it will silence us, and it will cause us to overfunction in other people's lives and really want to make it work and figure it out. And well, maybe it's me and I'm the reason that he acts this way. The walking on eggshells that we'll do in relationships with people. The whole sit down, you're not supposed to be heard. You're supposed to just be seen, and you're supposed to be serving when you are being seen, and you need to know your place. And so I think a lot of us struggle when we're in relationships with people to feel like we have some power and autonomy over our bodies. And again, as we speak about this International Day of the Girl Child, and being able to recognize the importance of us being able to be seen with humanity and with dignity and to be respected. A lot of times, people will say that women, and particularly black women, are some of the most degraded, lowest forms of people in the world with regard to how we're being viewed, and oftentimes that there is an expectation of that you're going to be loud or that you're going to be excessive, and that you don't know how to serve, and you don't know how to take care of a potential partner, and that your evaluation is how you cook and how you keep house, and it doesn't leave a lot of space for women to be able to explore who they are. And I think even a lot of times as we talk about women being sexual beings, there's a lot of shame that's placed on that. Oh, if you, there's a lot of music out right now that is women being very empowered, body positivity, and they're saying things that men do not think, again, is ladylike. And so if you listen to that, then what does that make you? And being called out of your name, I will never forget a white political official commented on the song WAP, and Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. And if you've listened to the song, you know the lyrics. And he was like, I would never want that to be, that's disgusting. And these women should be role models. And it's like, you've never listened to any of their music. You have no idea anything about them, but you've already stigmatized them based on a song that is simply them expressing their empowerment about themselves and how they're viewed in relationships. You didn't have to listen to it, but you made some judgments and you pulled a lot of stereotypes in there. But you're the same, one of the same people that's talking about free speech and a part of some of these organizations that very much want to tell women what their rights are as opposed to allowing women to have their own rights. But those are some of those moments that we experience where we become silenced. And I remember asking in a workshop one time, what was the first time that you can remember being told something that was not true, but you believed it? That you are responsible for people being inappropriate with you. It was your fault. This, no one else would want you. Um, you need to be lucky that someone is with you. This goes back to our domestic violence conversation that we had in the first week of the month. That you're too loud or you're too soft. You're not good enough or you think you're too good. You're too emotional. You were too much to manage. You're too much to deal with. I hear a lot of women really feel like it's not a safe space for them to be able to express if they have a difference of opinion, without being accused of being combative or being disrespectful, or like, why don't you advocate for me? Why don't you show up for me? Why don't you support me? Because you're not allowed to give any constructive feedback or have a difference of opinion. Or you'll show up in a meeting and you'll say something and it'll be dismissed or overlooked, or even kind of put down, a joke made about it. But a male could say that same thing and then it's a great idea and let's run forward with it. And it can feel really invalidating to be in spaces like that where it's almost if you lead first with your gender and no one sees anything else behind that. And when you attempt to try to make people pay attention, that's when all the negative comments start coming about you. Women don't make good leaders. Nobody wants to work under a woman. Women would make an awful president. We've heard these things over the years. And so I've also asked women how this has affected them in terms of just kind of their development into being a woman. And so it leads to that perfectionism. So everything has to be tight and it has to be right and it has to be perfect. The house, the kids, the job, the assignments. I can't even let it go because I keep rereading it and rereading it, trying to make sure that it's the quality that I want people to see, because I'm so worried about that people will judge my personality and my person based on a product that I have. Then we have, that again, taking care of everyone. And so you're the person that's at the church, opening the doors and closing the doors, cleaning and setting up. It could be your family, it could be at work. You're the go to person that everybody relies on. You're the person that people will come to after they've messed something up and they want you to fix it. You're the person that they come to train out of the people that will ultimately become your supervisor. And it is very difficult for us not to be in a role where we're serving or being what we call other focus, because it doesn't feel like I'm worth enough to do that for myself. That feels selfish. But when I do it for other people, that feels like what I should be doing, because that goes back to the lady rules of what we're taught, that you need to value other people more than you value yourself. It is better to give than to receive, which I think is oftentimes taken out of context. Or we're really angry. Like I'm hurting myself. I'm doing things that are self destructive. I'm sabotaging myself. I may continue to be in relationships with people that will abuse me and hurt me and not respect me and walk all over me. But then I get to a place where I'm not trusting of anyone because I've had those relationships with the same type of people over and over again. And so now I start using anger as my barrier to keep people out. I take things really personal. And I feel like I'm constantly being attacked. And so there is this, it begins to be a spirit of almost criticism on you because you're angry all the time. Like it almost emanates from you as if it's one of those neon signs that's flickering, and you don't even realize how angry you're coming across to other people. That people don't necessarily bring you in spaces with everybody because they're not sure how you're going to get along with people, because you might take something they say out of context, or you might feel like you're being judged or attacked. And when people are not doing any of those things, but your perception is such that they are. Then I talk about the person that always wants to fix everyone, the fixer uppers that I tell people all the time, like, you're constantly creating these projects. Well, I just know how it feels to be in that position, and we over empathize with people, and so we're taking on what their experiences is and making it our own. Or we're thinking about times in our lives where we felt that way, where we didn't feel loved or valued and no one paid attention to us, and so we want to pay attention to people, and they keep showing us that they're not ready to be able to be who we want them to be, but we keep trying to hold on to this image of who they could be, but they have so much potential. So now you're working harder than they are. You're showing up for them, they're not showing up for you. And this doesn't have to just be romantic partners. This can be friendships. This can be coworkers. You'll find yourself always over investing in people who underinvest in you, and then you feel hurt because it's not being reciprocated. Then we have people, I think, that grow up and don't feel like they have any worth of value outside of partnership. And so they end up being codependent in relationships. Like, I need to have that title. I need for someone to have chosen me. I need to be able to say I belong to someone because I don't feel like I have the capacity to stand on my own without that relationship. And you have to understand that there was a period of time where if we did not have a male who was representing us, we weren't able to do anything. Like, we couldn't get a house without a man signing for it. We couldn't get a loan. We couldn't be able to have a business. And I think for some women growing up in spaces where the man was the primary breadwinner and maybe the woman was the caretaker of the family, and so I'm dependent on you, sir, to be able to take care of the family. And so then I feel like I have to have you. If I don't have you, I'm not able to stand out here on my own. And then I think a lot of times women just don't want to be alone. I hear that a lot from women, that they just, the loneliness feels so loud and suffocating to them, and it's just they can't breathe, and so they will lose themselves just to be with someone else. And so there's a lot of sacrifice that is made. And so you, instead of getting actual intimacy and connection, you just have somebody in the space, and they may be in and out of the space because you may be one of several people that they're sharing that space with. But it's better to have something than have nothing, is often the mentality that comes along with that. And some of that does come from, I remember being told as a young lady, nobody's going to want to marry you if you don't learn how to not be so independent. Nobody wants someone who's going to be smarter than them, or so there are all of these, like, hey, you need to be preparing yourself for a husband, and this characteristics you got going on right here, that's not it, girl. You're not going to be able to find a husband, and you need to be more focused on learning how to cook and iron. My mother used to be able to iron, and they're literally, she would call them cat creases, the little bit of wrinkles that kind of get after you've ironed something, and she would not be okay. And that was the obsessive compulsive in her, until every single wrinkle was out of that shirt. Goes back to that perfectionism, but it was also a part of her anxiety. And so what ends up happening for us is that we have all this huge anxiety. Our mind won't stop racing. We are thinking and overthinking and going back and forth about the worst case scenarios and what might happen and what was this person thinking and do they remember what I just said and I shouldn't have said that. And we're in our head so much that it causes us to create. If you haven't seen Inside Out too, those Inside Out movies are some of my favorites. I reference them in therapy quite a bit. This spiral, they did such a good job of showing what that anxious loop looks like, and you just feel out of control, but you can't stop it. Once you get in that loop, it's almost as if you have to be kind of shoved out of it. And so they represented that in the movie in an awesome way because that's it. Like I have to be disrupted because my anxiety is so bad. And my mom would say she would break out in hives before her mother would come visit. So, because our mother was one of them, let me check the baseboards, let me go lift up this lamp and go under this, let me check these curtains and make sure there's some dust. Because again, you being a lady, the reflection of who you are, your worth, and your value as a woman is how well you keep this house, how well you're keeping this man. And so I do think for a lot of women, some of that anxiety comes from that, like, hey, every decision has all of this weight. Everything that I do is going to have some kind of impact. How I'm viewed, what kind of access I have, if I'm chosen, if I'm going to be allowed to be able to stay in this position, if I'm going to progress, all of these things that we put so much weight on. And again, that's one of the residuals, unfortunately, of some of these lady rules that we have. Then we have the avoidance piece. And I think a lot of people, particularly when they're in depressive episodes, like that's when they'll see a lot of this avoidance show up. So you're withdrawing from people, you're isolating yourself. Things are starting to get bad, but you won't tell anybody what's going on. And so you just kind of like, I'm going to shut that out and not have to deal with it. And so it's exploded by the time you finally reach out and ask for help, or you're in a position where people just find out because things have gotten so out of control. But you'll also see people who are in this avoidance place using relationships to try to fill voids, using substances to try to fill voids, just anything that I can do to numb myself and not have to deal with the reality of what's underneath. And this is also, unfortunately, sometimes some of the residual of the lady rules is that it is not okay for me to talk about it. Right? As a woman, you keep that close to the vest. You don't let that come out of the house. You don't share that with people. You never say anything about your partner or your children out in public. You don't embarrass the family. You're a reflection of this family. And so you keep those things in and you're not sharing with them, with anyone. So then what happens? It ends up setting up in our bodies in all kinds of different ways. And so we're having some of these physiological reactions to these things we've stuffed down and internalized. And sometimes that's what we'll do with food. Food can be a part of our avoidance too. Food is going to be there when nothing else is. And so we're going to just shove them emotions down with a delicious snack cake, or wash them down with a beverage. And then I think we also have people that like misdirect. So they've got all of these wounds and this trauma and this abandonment and all of the things they've dealt with, possibly as girls. That may be people who experienced abuse or neglect or just really overly critical people in their lives. And so what ends up happening is I can't direct it toward these people, so I'm going to direct it in other ways. So it might be that unsolicited advice that we give. Nobody asked for it. It feels like you're just kind of being critical of me all the time. There's a woman, she does a really good job of these little cute skits, and she's like, I told you not to marry that woman who only seasons with salt and pepper. She don't know how to cook, no garlic or nothing in here. And so as we're dealing with being girls growing into women, you see those women who are critical of other women, who may be critical of you. They may have been critical of your body shape and size. They may have been critical of your hair. I know a lot of, especially older women, they didn't like the natural hairstyles. They think that's wild and unkempt. And so if it's not straight, it's not great. And so unfortunately, what has happened is now I've grown up and I've become one of those women. And so I nitpick and I'm very negative toward other people. And I don't take responsibility for how my behavior has impacted others. I may have been in relationships with people who are abusive toward me. And so wasn't able to say anything to them, so now everybody else is going to catch it. And I will say that, well, shoot, I'm old. I can say what I want to now. I used to let people do whatever they wanted to me. I don't anymore. And so there's this sense of entitlement. And you'll see those are often wanting you to revere the title of who they are, whether that's grandma, auntie, or mama, or mother of the church, or whoever it may be. But they don't want to give the respect or any of the other things that go along with it. Like that grandmama that doesn't actually show up and spend time with her grandkids. But when she comes over, she expects the grandkids to be like, Grandma, and love her and take all these pictures, right? So there's that entitlement that goes along with that. So I told you I was going to talk to you a little bit about how we've been affected in negative ways by the lady rules. There are definitely some positive ways that we've been affected, but I want to leave you with how you change that narrative. I do want you to know that whatever happened to you as a little girl, and we all have little girls inside of us, some of them are longing for dad, some of them are longing for mom's love and affection and her being connected and empathetic and loving on us and us having that really good friend relationship as we grow older. Some of us are longing for the innocence that was lost, that was taken from us, from the boundaries we were never allowed to have, for taking care of adults and not being able to be a child. And so we're longing to go back and actually have a childhood because I had to step up because I had parents that weren't being parents, and so I had to step up and raise siblings. Whatever it may be inside of you that you're still operating from that narrative, I do want you to know that you can rewrite your story. It does not have to stay the same way that it started. And so you can change that ending if you want to be a different type of woman, if you want to show up and be able to love differently, if you want to be able to love yourself differently, then you're allowed to be able to do that. So think about who it is you want to be, even if you don't know the path to how to get to her, but at least be able to write out what she could look like, because when we know where we're going, it'll help us get there a little easier. Being able to forgive other people who have wronged us and hurt us and neglected us and abandoned us and not shown up for us, criticized us and demeaned us and harmed us, right? But also self forgiveness, because sometimes we were the people that were hurting ourselves. We were sabotaging ourselves. We were not loving ourselves. And so being able to forgive us too. And forgiveness of other people doesn't mean that you have to accept them back in your life in order for them to hurt you again, but it just allows you to free yourself from carrying the heaviness of the weight of their inadequacies and their limitations, right? It allows you to be able to understand, I know how they got there. It does not absolve them of how it affected me, but I understood how they got there. And so for that, I can forgive them because they were damaged as well. Being able to love and affirm yourself is very important. And I know women struggle with this, and being able to shift how we even think about and perceive things, that taking things personal and the negative thinking and the anger, all of that is about how we see situations, how we see ourselves, how we see other people. You have the ability to change the way that you think about things, but it does take practice. It does take you being able to shift from a place of what I don't have and what happened to me and how life hasn't been fair and how I've had to figure all this out on my own and not feel like I had support, to let me think about what I did have in this journey. Maybe I found another group of women who were supportive. Maybe I had that one person at church who saw me, reached out and connected with me, somebody who was kind. Maybe it was that person that saw me trying to wrangle these kids and get groceries in the car, and they said, Ma'am, would you mind if I help you put your groceries in the car? Thank you so much. These kind of things allow us to be able to shift from that glass is half empty to the glass is half full philosophy. And it does mean affirming yourself and valuing yourself and validating yourself and seeing yourself as the type of woman you want to be, instead of seeing all your deficits and what you feel like you don't have. Because I've shared with you all before, whatever you will feed will grow. And so if you're feeding the negativity, like I don't have anything to be joyful about, I got tickled. I was talking to one of my clients and I said, well, what would be your idea of a good day? And she was like, me not having to work, my bank account being, out this world, and me being on an island somewhere. But how realistic is that in an everyday kind of scenario? I have to be able to find a version of a good day that's something that is simple. It may be that I woke up this morning and I have the capacity to be here. It may be that my child talking her neck off to me, but she's able to do that because some kids didn't come home. And so some mamas don't have the opportunity to be able to experience that. It may be that I wasn't a mother myself, but I have had a chance to be able to be a present person in other people's lives. And I appreciate having that opportunity to pour into other people. It may be that, you know what, I don't hurt as much today as I hurt yesterday. So being able to make sure that you are feeding those gratitudes, if you will, and being able to be empowered, being able to recognize what your gifts are. So many people will tell me they don't have gifts, they don't have strengths, there's nothing unique about them, there's nothing special about them. Some people feel like they don't even understand why they're here. They don't have a purpose. But you have to be empowered to see yourself in your potential. Being able to, I've talked to people about this a lot. Like, you don't have to be a minister to have a ministry, because your ministry is what you do, not who you are. I say that same thing to people. Being a purpose person doesn't mean that you have to have all of these things. You have to have all these people in your life, that you have to have all these people following you and affirming you and validating you and saying you're great. It means that every day you show up in the best way that you can for yourself and for other people, and recognizing that you have a voice and that it's your choice to be able to decide how you want to use that voice. And sometimes you're going to use that to help other people, and sometimes you're going to use that voice to advocate for yourself. It's always important that we take accountability. There is no one that is perfect, nor should that be a goal. But sometimes I really need to think about how I'm showing up. Am I putting too much pressure on myself? Am I not putting enough pressure on myself? Am I not holding myself responsible for how I make other people feel and how I treat other people? Am I taking too much responsibility for other people and how they show up, and I'm protecting them, and I'm putting them in positions to keep them safe and protect them, but I'm not doing the same thing for me? So you do have to take stock. You have to take inventory. You'll hear me say that a good bit about who am I, not who I want to be, but who am I? And then once I figure out who I am, then I can work on who I want to be. And then I will also tell you, ladies, that it's so important to have support of other women in your life who are doing and being how you want to do, or what you want to do and how you want to be, because it's important for us to have models. Learning how to be able to express yourself without having to curse folks out, without having to get agitated, but also without getting overwhelmed and crying, and then like, oh, I didn't get anything accomplished. They're just like, there you go crying again, right? And so knowing that there's a space and a place for me to be able to express myself, because sometimes my tears say what my words can't, but also being able to articulate myself when I need to. And sometimes we need supportive women to be able to teach us and guide us and practice with us, because I want you to know that the lady rules are learned. And so you can unlearn things in the same way that you learned them, but you can also add new things that are more fitting to you and who you want to be and who you want the girls around you to be. Because I also think about that piece too, of empowering other girls. And what are we teaching them? What are some things, and I frequently will tell people this, if you were to write your own set of rules to pass on to the girls in your family, to pass on to the version of you if you were able to go back, what would you want her to know about being a woman and taking care of herself and loving herself and investing in herself and nurturing herself? You would want her to know that it's going to be tough some days. There are going to be some challenges. There's definitely going to be some storms. But out of those are going to come some wonderful rainbows, and some seeds are going to be spread, and they're going to sprout, and they're going to become wonderful things. And those wonderful things are you. Okay? Be well.